Hello everyone and welcome to Sweet Dreams Anesthesia. My name's Ani and today I'm going to give you some top tips from my experience doing the ANZCA Viva last sitting in 2022. These are the few tips that I wish I had going into my Viva and hopefully they'll make you feel a lot more comfortable. I've chosen to give you some non-technical tips just to make sure that you're comfortable on the day. And the first tip that was the most common from anyone that sat the previous exam was know the venue. So my sitting was at the Melbourne Convention Centre and I was constantly told to get to Melbourne the day earlier. So if you're travelling from interstate, arrive the day before and walk the venue. So what this means is actually go to the venue physically and walk to exactly where you're going to be going to check in on the day. And what I found doing that was that the walk from the entrance of the convention centre to where the actual venue was, where it was actually being held, was actually quite a long walk, and it actually did take around about 10 minutes itself. It's funny, when I got there, they had the desk of all the workers who were checking people in, and they could tell by your scared face that you were just another one of those people that were just walking and making sure you knew exactly where to go on the day. The good thing about that was that on the invite that you get the time when your Viva is going to be, and for me it was 1 o'clock, and I thought this meant that my Viva was going to start exactly at 1 o'clock. But what it actually meant was, talking to the person on the day, was that that's when I have to turn up, and it was probably a half an hour after that where my Viva actually began. So the day is set up into a morning and afternoon session. The morning session will finish around about 12 o'clock and the afternoon session will start at around about 1 o'clock. When you get there, you check in with the workers and they will take away all your kind of electronic belongings. So they'll take away your phone, they'll take away your watch, and then you just sit down in rows of seats. And once you sit down, they give you a candidate number, which is color-coded, that they put on. And essentially, you'll notice that there's 3 people, including yourself, that have the same color-coded candidate number, not the same candidate number, but just the same color as you. And those are the people that you'll be going into the Viva with. So there'll be around about anywhere from 15 to 20 people just sitting down waiting to go in, and there'll be staggered starts in terms of when they're going to be starting their Viva. As you walk into a general hall which has lots of big cubicles that have been placed in, and the cubicles have been placed in rows, and each row has 3 sets of cubicles. And there's again there's just an ANZCA worker, which is just making sure that you're in the right order. So you stand in front of the right cubicle at the point of when we actually start the Viva. So they make sure that you're in the right order. A bell goes off, and then you walk in this row, in between these row of cubicles, and you stand facing away from the cubicle. And the reason you stand facing away is that there's the stem that's on the other side, and so a bell will go off and you turn around and now you can read the stem, and then you have 2 minutes just to stand there and read the stem and kind of collect your thoughts. My advice in this time is that the stems usually are small, and I would just try to read the stem, have a good strong opening answer, and then pretty much clear my mind of anything else. So I didn't want to be guessing where the Viva was going to go. I didn't want that to affect how I was going to answer my next questions, because I wanted to be led by the examiner. So I would read the stem, think of my opening answer, and then for the next minute not think of anything else. And then as I felt like the 2 minutes was getting closer to the end, I would revisit that answer in my head and have it ready to go. And I would have practiced it a couple of times so I could just smash it out as soon as I went in there. So the bell goes off and you walk inside into the examiner's room. There'll be 2 examiners. They'll be just sitting across a table, and they'll introduce themselves and they'll ask you what your candidate number is. They'll offer you some water. They'll offer you a pen and paper, which will be supplied, so you don't have to worry about bringing that. And then you pretty much get started on the Viva itself. So they'll just ask you what the opening question is. Now, when you walk in, I always just try to smile and act confident, although you're nervous inside. Whether this gives you extra marks or not, at least it sets a nice tone between you and the examiner, where you might feel a bit more comfortable. Now, each examiner is different, and the first examiner I had on my Viva day certainly had a very positive kind of approach to giving Vibas. So he would give positive reassurance whenever I was on the right track. But then the subsequent examiner right afterwards was completely stone cold. Didn't give me any kind of non-verbal cues whether I was on the right track. And that was the general theme of the day. And the trick is not to get hung up on that, because it can be quite different to the Vibas that you practice with your friends or someone that's senior to you that makes you feel a lot more comfortable. So what I'd recommend is that at your workplace, pick the scariest consultant that you work with, or the scariest registrar that you work with, that you don't really have a good rapport with, and ask them to give you a Viva. And that'll probably best simulate the experience that you'll get on the day of actually getting a Viva with someone that's stone cold. And when you've done the Viva with them, ask them how your non-technical skills went. So how was your speech of tone? Were they able to coherently understand you? Did they like the pace that you were going at? And you'll get a lot more feedback from the people that you don't know than the people that you do know, because people that you do know that give you feedback, generally they're trying not to make sure that your feelings aren't hurt. The other thing I noticed is that the examiners, compared to people that Viva you on ANZCA nights or at work, the examiners are very quick to pick up on subtle things that you might just have said wrong. And that's obvious because when you get a practice Viva, the person that might be giving you a practice Viva might just have a layout of a Viva that they've not written, and it's just step-by-step answers. And when you say something that's just a bit off the normal track, they might not pick it up quickly because they don't know the answer themselves. But these guys on the day have been doing the same Viva over and over again, so they're very quick to pick up on any little thing that you might say. And so when they do pick you up on something, if they're spending time on it, then it's probably because it's a major point for you to progress on to the next step of the Viva. So it's a major understanding point that could be a potential pass or fail. If they pick you up on something and you don't know, and it's a minor point, hopefully they'll do what one of my examiners did on the day, which was just say it's a minor point and move on very quickly. So you'll get a good vibe between you and the examiner on when you think something's going to be very important and when you think something is just going to be not as important, depending on how fast they move along. If you do find yourself stumbling a little bit or forgetting what the question was, it's okay to ask the examiner, can you please repeat that question? It's also okay to ask the examiner, can I just have a moment to collect my thoughts? Because a moment in time for you seems like a long time, but it's probably just 5 or 10 seconds. So it's okay to do that, and you can even have a glass of water. Now just be mindful that these are bottles of water that you need to open up and then have, which does take a bit of time, and when you've got nervous hands, that can be awkward trying to open up. The other thing I'd recommend is knowing what your speech pattern or your speech speed is like when you get nervous. So either two things happen when you get nervous. Usually people will speed up or people will slow down their speaking when they get nervous. And knowing what that is on the day will really help you to make sure that you know exactly how fast to speak on the real day. Because the trick is you want to be able to progress through the Viva quickly, but you also want to be able to speak coherently so that you don't have to repeat yourself, so you're not wasting time. The last thing I will say is that it's okay to come out of the Viva failing or feeling like you failed a couple of stations. Now there's 12 stations overall. If you think you've just failed 1 or 2, then you're doing really well. If you think you bombed a whole section and you failed 4 stations, you're still doing really well. You have to have a goldfish memory. If your first Viva is terrible and you go to the next section, you walk out, you just have to completely forget about what it was like in the previous Viva, because you might get a couple of stations that you absolutely know and smash. And that's how the day will go. It goes in a flash, and it's hard to enjoy it in the moment, but you've accomplished something that is quite amazing. And whether you pass or fail has no reflection on how you are as an anesthetic doctor. You just have to enjoy the moment that you're in, and kind of just soak in the fact that you actually made it to that stage. I hope that helps. As always, if you have any questions, you can message me at Sweet Dreams Anesthesia or check out the website as well. And we'll have more content coming soon.